A few years ago, I was living with my ex-boyfriend. We had recently moved into a two-bedroom house and started turning it into a cozy home. The back bedroom was converted into an office because the house only had one bathroom, which could only be accessed through that room. Since we often had friends staying over on the couch, we wanted to avoid the awkwardness of them walking through our bedroom to reach the bathroom. One evening, about a month after moving in, my ex was out with his work friends, leaving me alone in the house. It was quiet, and I was having a typical evening to myself, watching TV and eating takeout. Occasionally, I heard faint creaks and bumps, but every time I tried to focus on them, the sounds would stop. Later that night, I decided to use the computer in the office bedroom before heading to bed. At the time, our phone line wasn't set up, and my pay-as-you-go phone had run out of credit, leaving me unable to contact anyone. As I sat typing on my laptop in the dimly lit room, I heard a faint rattling sound. It was so subtle I couldn't tell if it was real or my imagination. Turning off the music to listen carefully, I checked the front door and the backyard but found nothing. However, about 10 minutes later, I heard a chilling screech, like metal scraping against metal. Fear set in as I grabbed an iron rod from the closet and locked myself in the office bedroom, barricading the door with a chair. I stayed quiet, listening intently, and soon I heard whispers, two male voices coming from outside the slightly open window. Peeking from the bathroom window, I realized they were behind my gate, discussing how they had noticed our valuable belongings and that I was alone. Suddenly, loud banging shook the gate as they tried to break it down. Terrified, I prepared to defend myself when a floodlight from a neighboring house turned on. The barking of a dog and voices shouting scared the intruders off, and they ran away. When my ex returned home at 4 a.m., I told him everything. The next morning, I found the gate barely hanging by one hinge, its lock visibly tampered with. If it hadn't been for the neighbor's light, I don't know what could have happened. Over 20 years ago, when my son was born prematurely at 32 weeks, we were fortunate that he didn't have major health issues. After a month in the hospital, we brought him home, though he required oxygen and caffeine to regulate his heartbeat. That's when strange things began happening. Our cat refused to enter his room, even though it used to love being there. The dog would sit at the stairs, tilting its head as if hearing something. A toy gifted to my son, a peekaboo big bird, would activate by itself, even after I stored it in a box. I also often felt like someone was in the house with me. We used an Angel Care baby monitor that would sound an alarm if it detected no movement. The alarm would go off frequently, waking me to check on my son, though he was always fine. During this time, I began dreaming about a shadowy woman with long hair standing by his crib. One night, I was woken abruptly by someone shaking me roughly. Startled, I looked at my husband, but he was sound asleep on the other side of the bed. Panicked, I rushed to my son's room and turned on the light, a first for me. At that moment, I heard a small gasp from his crib. I believe the light startled him enough to make him breathe again. The strange occurrences continued until he no longer needed oxygen or caffeine. The toys stopped malfunctioning, the pets returned to normal, and the dreams ended. I believe a protective spirit, a young woman, possibly indigenous, watched over him during that critical time. When I was 9, my mom left my older brother and me home alone one afternoon. My brother, about 13, was playing Xbox in the living room with his headset on, chatting with friends. Suddenly, there was a knock at the carport door. Without thinking, I ran to answer it. Standing there was a man I didn't recognize. The only barrier between us was the screen door, which wasn't locked. He asked if our parents were home. Feeling uneasy, I stammered, "No, but my big brother is here." The man immediately reached for the screen door, but just then, my brother appeared behind me, forcing the door shut and stepping outside. The man claimed he wanted to buy the old swing set in our yard, but my brother firmly told him it wasn't for sale and came back inside. He didn't say anything to me and resumed playing his game. At the time, I didn't fully grasp how dangerous the situation was. Looking back, I realize how lucky we were that my brother intervened. Last year, my friend and I were scouting locations for a film project and decided to visit a swinging bridge an hour from our hometown. The bridge, 400 feet long and 60 feet above the water, was only for pedestrians. As we crossed, a woman on the car bridge nearby started shouting and waving. She called out names we didn't recognize, so we told her we weren't who she was looking for. She didn't respond but kept staring and eventually ran toward the same direction we were headed. When we reached the other side and began filming, the woman appeared again, yelling the same names. She started running toward us, making us uneasy. We quickly grabbed our things and headed back to the swinging bridge. Halfway across, we saw her stop at the entrance, holding something behind her back. My friend started recording her, and as soon as she noticed, she turned and walked away. To this day, we don't know who she was or what she wanted. The thought of what could have happened still sends chills down my spine. I live in a tiny town where everyone knows everyone, and things are usually peaceful. Our town is so small that most people don't even notice it on the map, but I like the close-knit community. At least, that's what I used to think before an unsettling incident changed my perspective. Being a 15-year-old girl, I realized how unsafe things can sometimes feel. One sweltering day, when even breathing felt exhausting, I decided to have a sleepover with my best friend, who was already at my house. We packed up our things and started walking to her place. As we were leaving, we heard the cheerful jingle of the ice cream truck. Smiling, I told my friend we might get free ice cream since the owners were family friends. When the big white truck pulled into our neighborhood, kids gathered around like seagulls fighting over snacks. After the kids in front of us got their treats, I stepped forward, but instead of seeing the familiar owner, I was greeted by a stranger. He looked rough, with an unshaven face, a dirty tank top, and an unsettling grin. When I asked about the usual owner and his son, he said they were on vacation and had left him in charge. Something about his demeanor felt off, so I quickly turned away, mumbling a polite goodbye. As my friend and I walked away, I shared my unease about the new guy. My instincts told me he wasn't safe. While walking, we heard the ice cream truck jingle again. This time, the truck drove past us slowly, and the man gave us a long, creepy look before speeding off. Feeling uneasy, we decided to take a different route and waved to a friend we saw nearby. She joined us after saying that the ice cream man had been staring at her too. The three of us continued walking, trying to ignore the truck, but it appeared again, stopping briefly to watch us before driving off. By the time we reached our friend's house, it was already getting dark. She said goodbye and urged us to hurry home. With a 30-minute walk ahead, we kept talking to ease the tension, but 20 minutes later, the jingle returned. This time, the truck's engine roared as it sped toward us. Panicked, we ran as fast as we could to my friend's house. Finding the door locked, we grabbed the spare key from the garage, but the truck stopped outside our house. The man stepped out, holding a shotgun, and began pounding on the door, yelling for us to open it. We hid under the porch, trembling as he broke into the house. The sound of the shotgun firing made us sprint to a neighbor's house. Breathless and terrified, we told them everything. They called the police, who later informed us they found the shotgun but not the man or the truck. A year has passed, but the memory of that night still haunts me. The ice cream truck owner never got his truck back, and the man was never found. When I was 8, my mom threw me a birthday party and invited her friend, who brought her kids, Sally, Billy, and Lily. After the party, we decided to have a sleepover and watch a horror movie. Eventually, we got bored and decided to play hide and seek in the dark. My brother Charlie was chosen as the seeker while the rest of us scattered to find hiding spots. I chose to hide behind the couch, even though my uncle's friend, Scott, was passed up drunk on it. Lily joined me, which I didn't mind at first. Suddenly, Scott started laughing and pointing at the ceiling. Lily placed her hand on my shoulder, saying, "Don't worry, I'm here for you." Her voice sounded distant and strange. When I turned to look at her, her hand looked pale and bony, and her face was horrifyingly distorted with massive, unnatural features. Terrified, I screamed and bolted upstairs. Charlie saw me running and followed. Everyone gathered in the room as I recounted what happened, but Lily claimed she had been hiding under the dining table with Charlene the entire time. Suddenly, Justin noticed red marks on my back. When my shirt was lifted, we saw 4 deep scratches that I hadn't felt until that moment. The pain set in, and I started crying. I refused to keep playing and stayed in the room while the others continued. Later, Justin saw something peek out of Charlie's room, a glowing white head without facial features. Everyone decided to stick together for the rest of the night. By morning, my scratches had vanished, but I've never been able to forget the horrifying events of that night. Jack and I have been best friends since childhood, spending countless nights at each other's houses. His family moved into their current home after his grandmother passed away. It's a large one-story house with a long hallway and rooms filled with old, creepy items. Jack often told me about strange occurrences, like feeling watched or hearing odd noises. One night, during a sleepover in 2014, I experienced it myself. While lying on a recliner in the den, I felt a cold draft and heard faint whispers. Another night, Jack and I were playing video games when the door kept opening and closing on its own. Later, when we went to bed, the door opened again. I shut it, but it kept creaking open throughout the night. Terrified, I barely slept. These eerie incidents made me realize how unsettling his house could be. I haven't stayed there since,